Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Value Exchange podcast. I'm Annabelle Lambert and I'm here with my usual co-host Rob Pye. We are absolutely delighted to have with us today Jodie McNally, who is the Chief Programmes Officer for EY Foundation and much more than that job title. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Jodie to tell us a little bit about her, tell us her story, who she is and what she's about. So Jodie, tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yes, nice to speak to you. As you said, I'm Chief Programmes Officer, but I have had what feels like every job title on the foundation, so I've done quite a few different things. But yeah, I've worked in the charity sector for a long time, probably 20 years, I think, now. Charities big and small, and obviously moved to the EY Foundation probably about 6.5 years ago. So it was the first corporate foundation that I'd worked for, and that was quite an interesting thing for me. But I've had sort of a consistent history, I suppose, working with young people, always been young people focused, usually about supporting young people from low income backgrounds to get into work. That's been my main focus. Did go through a phase of being more focused on like the employer side, I suppose, so working more with the employers than young people, but always a level of consistency across everything I've done. So like I said, charities big and small. In the olden days in EBP land, for those of you that will remember the education business partnerships that were around back then, worked for a few of those, which I think is always a good training ground for anyone that goes on to work with young people in their career. Yeah, so that's sort of a potted history of my career, I suppose.
And so how come you ended up doing what you're doing? What was your motivation for that? Where's that come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it wasn't actually my sort of intention, I suppose, when I was very young. So as a child, I was very committed to becoming a journalist, and that was the track I was on. I did all of the things I needed to get there. I went to university, did journalism there. Did a lot of free work in magazines whilst also working for getting paid to work in the likes of Peacocks and Argos to make sure I could afford to live, and was a journalist for a little while after uni. But I'd always done volunteering ever since I did sort of Duke of Edinburgh when I was like 13 or 14. I'd had a history in volunteering, usually working with young people. To start with, it was more focused on young people with special needs. So I did a lot of stuff with autistic young people. I did a lot of stuff with young people that had physical disabilities. And some of that volunteering turned out into like paid work in the holidays and that kind of thing. So it's always something that I was interested in doing. Maintained that during uni as well, and volunteered for different things there. And it wasn't because I wasn't enjoying journalism. Like that was a very fun thing to be involved in your mid-20s. But for me, like a sense of purpose has always been like the thing that's really important to me. It sounds very cheesy, but unfortunately it is true for me. So if I can't see the point in doing something, then I'm not going to do it. So basically I quit that job, much to the disdain of my parents, who wondered why I'd just spent all of this money going to uni, etc., to just then change my mind. And I went to work for a charity in London instead. Again, focused on supporting adults into work who had various disabilities. And that was the start of it, really, then for me to have a total career change. And from that moment, I've done nothing but work in charities. I had a very small stint working in FE at one point. But yeah, I've been doing the same thing since, I would say.
And we tried to help not always sort of go back to the cradle and go back to, you know, early life, but to look at where the intrinsic, you know, motivations are for people to do what they do. Because if you're kind of like, you know, not doing what has at least great meaning for you, then you know, it sort of can. And you had, I think you were the first of your family to go to university. You were brought up in Huddersfield, if I remember correctly.
Right.
So
you tell by the accent.
Are you from Canada?
For the Canadians watching, you know, it's like it's an in-joke. It won't mean anything to you, don't. But you keep, so in previous chats we kind of keep coming back to things that are just hugely meaningful for you when you're supporting young people, particularly the transformational journey where somebody kind of has a moment, you know, where you're supporting someone. And for people watching who might be in EY or in other consultancies or big organizations who maybe not had your life, because every life is unique, it's kind of maybe difficult to get their head around, you know, that journey for a young people. But do you know, any pearls of unpicking your journey, how that might, you know, why that's important, why you want to narrow the disadvantage gap, you know, the sort of the why of it all. Hard question, sorry, but you know.
No, it's not hard, really. I think it's not for me, to be honest. I think obviously I could have ended up in a very different place from the start that I had in life, if I'm being honest. So my parents divorced when I was young, 7, and obviously, as you said, you know, I was the first in my family to go to university. I was from a low-income background, so I've always had a personal affinity, I suppose, with this cause. Obviously, Huddersfield is still quite an insular place, and a lot of the people that I went to school with are still there, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I wanted something different for myself, but I can see how people can become trapped in a place when there is like a lack of opportunity, really. And so that is the thing that like motivates and drives me every day, because obviously the young people that I work with are from a similar kind of background, they live in a similar kind of place, and sometimes it's not for the want of trying, but if you've got quite a small frame of reference, if your parents aren't working or they are but only in, you know, certain industries or whatever else, it can be quite hard for you to break free of that environment. And so that like is the main thing that drives me every day, because I know that we've all got the opportunity to make a change and enable young people to have like the careers that they deserve. And everyone can play a role in that, no matter how big or small it is. I was speaking to one of the young people that I mentor the other day, and he said to me, how do you have the time basically to, you know, mentor all of these young people, because, you know, everybody is time poor. It's just life, like that's just the way it is. You don't meet many people these days like, no, I've got loads of time at work. Do you know what I mean? It's just not it's just not a thing. But for me, if you can't give time, like I think that, you know, we all need to take a big look at ourselves if that's the case. We've all got control over our own time and destiny. And just giving time to a young person can make a massive difference to them. So I think there's small things that we can all do, and obviously some bigger things as well. But for me, like that's my main motivation, is obviously my own background, my own affinity to the cause, but also knowing that we can all have an impact on young people, whether it be big or small.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that we want to try to get across in large corporates. And I'd like to move on to EY Foundation, you know, questions in a bit. But you're lucky in that you've had the background that you've had. not where you are, but the background is your blessing in that bit. Because actually, if you were born to 17 generations of university degrees and lots of money, and then you might be suffering in some different way, but actually you wouldn't necessarily have the empathy to close the disadvantage gap. So one of the things we're trying to do is communicate to people who are not as lucky as you in their background, and go, well, actually the way that you can empathize is to really get in touch with why it's difficult being you, even if you've got a gazillion pounds, or you've got all the privileges in the way. If you're suffering in a really bad way, and lots of people in work suffer, then maybe you can have more empathy for others that suffer too, and think of that, disadvantage, how you might close a disadvantage gap. But onto EYF. So you've been for quite a while, I think it was, chief exec, while you were covering maternity. As you say, you've done every role. Now EYF is not some tiny little charity. You want to help 1 million people in your. So tell us a bit about
2 million.
Millions. It's just EY is ex-employer, so full disclosure, Annabelle and I used to work for EY. Jodie doesn't work for EY. She works for the EY Foundation, which is a completely independent charity. But it's a small charity, but it's a massive part of EY's, building a better working world. Do you want to just give us what's EY Foundation?
Yeah, definitely. So, we were set up in 2014. Obviously, our main focus is on supporting young people from low-income backgrounds. We do that through many different ways. Some of it's through direct program delivery, some of it is through our influence work. And as you mentioned, we've got sort of big ambitions over the next 10 years to try and support basically all the young people on free school meals, to have more equitable opportunities in work. That's is a big ambition, but we are an ambitious organisation, and we're sort of laying all of the groundwork now for us to kind of achieve that aim. As mentioned, it won't all be through direct program delivery, but there'll be digital elements to that, some of our influence work, and other things. But the direct program delivery is obviously the core of what we do, and that's where we work really closely with EY across all of those strands. But obviously we have a big volunteering program. We work with over 3,000 EY people every year who volunteer to come and support our program delivery, whether it's been a mentor, hosting young people on work experience, facilitating workshops, coming to talk about the career journeys, all of those little things. But there are other sort of ways that we work in a more strategic way through obviously the bids and things that the firm are putting in, and for us to really demonstrate social value that way as well. And it's a win-win on both sides really, because for us it means we can support more young people, and for the firm obviously it really demonstrates what they're doing for the S in ESG. So yeah, it works really well, the close relationship that we've got.
So if I'm an employee of EY, I don't know much about EYF. If I don't, what can I do? What do you've mentioned this 3,000 volunteers. What can I do if I hear about this and I want to do more?
There's a range of different things that people can get involved in. So we try, obviously, EY people and people in general are very busy. So we try and structure our volunteering opportunities. So there's anything from an hour upwards in terms of commitment, in the hope that obviously we can suit all diaries. And we'd run, like training with people, because sometimes, young people can be quite a scary thing if you've not been around young people before. Some EY people, throw them into a pitch and they'll be absolutely fine in front of quite a scary group of adults, but throw them into a room of 60 young people and they're running for the hills. So it's quite a good training ground for them as well, because if you can capture the intention of a group of 16, 17-year-olds, then you won't be fazed by much after that.
But this is not a thing that is about EY, is it? You engage with many stakeholders, donors, businesses, government organizations. So is it, do you want to sort of just a bit about the program delivery side, an example of what that is? Because I'm itching to kind of move on also in terms of the, if you don't know about charities, youth work, what a day in the life of your staff's like, I think it would be it'll be entertaining if nothing else, to kind of just do a little bit of a what is it like working for EYF? You know, it's kind of, I know you're dealing with an awful lot of things in the air, but so an example maybe of a working with organizations delivering a program, what does it involve?
So for us, like, it's really important to work with both sides of the labour market. So obviously we do a lot of intensive work with young people, and you know, there's a lot of external chat about making sure young people are work ready, but actually it's sort of more important for us really to work with employers and make sure they're young people ready, because that is often where things fall down. It's actually not the young people, it's the other side. So
and what do you mean?
What do you mean by that?
But for the I'm only giving you a hard time because for people who might not have had this conversation 100 times before, what does it mean when you say an employer might not be young person ready? How could you know, if I'm an employer now,
if you've not had young people in your business before, then and young people that may be from, you know, low income background, have care and responsibilities of being in care themselves, all of those additional barriers to work, there needs to be a different way of welcoming them into the environment and understanding of things that may be barriers to them to be there in the first place. And so it can be simple things like when a young person starts work, making sure you set up a buddying system with someone there so they can ask all those silly questions that they don't feel comfortable asking to everybody else. Do you know what I mean? It's not all like rocket science.
The peer support.
Stuff.
The peer support.
But it's like little things that can be put in place to really make sure that's an environment where a young person can thrive. I did a session with some young people earlier in the week, and there was like little things where they were saying, so for example, they'd started work and they needed PPE for that particular job, but it was never made clear whether they were going to have to buy that themselves, or if the work was going to provide it. Obviously, when they go into work in the first month before they've been paid, travel and the cost of that was a barrier to them getting there. So in some organisations, they provide, obviously, they cover the cost of travel for the first month until the young person's got their paycheck, all of that sort of stuff. So we work with them for some practical stuff, but also to look at employee recruitment practices, because often, like, they can be quite tricky for young people to navigate. There's a lot of jargon still thrown about, expecting young people to know things that you'll only know if you've been in work for about 20 years. So we do a lot of work, and it's not because anyone's doing things in a way that's meant to be difficult for young people. It's just because there's a lot of tradition that goes on in workplaces, and we stick with what we know. And so we work with both sides of the labour market basically to make sure that we bring them together, and then that's like a productive relationship going forward. So that's like one of our main focuses.
I think it's as simple as trying to suspend all the assumptions that we have working with, you know, and so I had so many stories that in hindsight those stories seem funny, that illustrate those assumptions, like offering that young person a job and saying, right, I'll send you an email, you know, with a contract on it of employment, and you know, they don't have an email address, they've never had access to a computer. The job doesn't require it, but the bureaucracy needs to send an email. So, you know, it's sort of almost checking everything that you would assume being a human being, and kind of going, well, actually, let me just be a bit careful. Or, you know, the young person doesn't have a bank account. You know, because they're, you know, or I don't know, just countless other examples.
Well, no understanding of what an employment contract is, even. You know, they've never experienced anything like that before. I remember working with people, and you know, because I'm 104, you know, I you know, if I've got any questions about, you know, anything that I've done in the past, you go, okay, well, I need to understand what my holiday entitlement is, or whatever. You know, it's all detailed in your contract, or what the notice period is, or anything like that. It's all in there. It has to be. You know, that's the law, isn't it? That these things are in these hideous contracts that everyone has, but and just no sort of, it's like, I've signed it, that's that. You know, it's meaningless almost to some people. You know, they just don't have the wherewithal. They never experienced that before. You know,
and then assuming the young person then has the work experience, you know, don't assume that all your practices in work are going to be obvious to someone who's never been near the labour market.
100%.
We're on this technology. I think it's called StreamYard. You know, like working from home. We had a youngster or two where they were thinking that all this remote work they could do on their mobile phone.
Yeah,
and it was, you know, only when you realise they were struggling and unpick that. And realise actually it's really difficult to do knowledge work, remote work, the sort of we were doing that, you know, on a mobile phone. I mean, you could sort of do bits, but not really, you know, that doesn't work for everything. So, you know, they needed a laptop. They didn't have the money for a laptop. You know, it's like that traveling to work before the first paycheck. You know, it may seem, but it's just maybe something people don't think about because of assumptions.
There's a lot of like just demystifying that needs to go on. Again, like one of the young people, because we held a session with young people, it was all about like getting into work and what were the barriers of that. And when we held that earlier in the week, one of the girls was like, she's on a part-time contract, so obviously she's got pro rata. And she was like, I don't even know what that means. And then obviously she's got like the value, so her whole salary pro rata. She was like, and I get it, I'm working part-time, but why don't you just tell me what I'm getting instead of giving me the full value pro rata? Instead of me working it out, why can't you work it out?
I don't understand.
Like, so they're just all like demystifying, like I said, all the things that we just assume everyone's gonna know. And it's simple things like that will just make things a lot more accessible for young people, and also they'll be more interested in it as well. You know, it'll be less scary.
And just before we go inside EY and then talk about change, but or EYF, is in your experience the trustworthiness from somebody older to somebody younger, the role that trust plays in it? It's a theme that we have developed a lot in Ethos. We found, you know, a lot of young people who maybe looking at adults as individuals that they couldn't trust. Is trust something that has to be built, earned?
Yeah, I think so. It's really important. And I think some of the things that are put in place, you know, like reverse mentoring programs and stuff like that can really help to build like individual levels of trust, which then can be replicated across an organization. But without that, like, it's impossible for those relationships to succeed or for someone to be successful in work. Because as I always say to all the young people, you spend more time in work than you do at home. So you have to be 100% happy there, really. Or, well, you know, I don't know if anyone's ever 100% happy, but very close to 100% happy. Because otherwise it's really difficult. And so you've got to find an organisation that fits for you, and trust is like a massive part of that. Yeah, for sure.
And we had a young leader whose story was, I went to work for an organisation. I had, you know, I was in there 6 months doing sales, cold calling. It totally damaged my health. Therefore, I realised, you know, conclusion was that this was not for me. I absolutely hated it. It damaged my health. But actually, after her finding her why and what she loved doing, she found actually that she does love talking to people, and she does love sales, and she does. And when she, you know, frames it as just not reframe the old culture, because it was the old culture that was poisonous and killing her, but it's that sort of don't let the employer shape you to be somebody that you're not, because you'll never unshape that. It'll always, so find a culture, find friends that you like. If you like the people, then there's a good chance that it'll work. Don't try and mold your CV, your behaviors to convince somebody you're somebody you're not, because you won't be the best self then.
No, and everybody wants different things, don't they, as well? Yeah. So, that's where it works. Like, especially, with the young people that we work with, they've all got, really broad aspirations across, different sectors, industries, into career trajectory as well. Like, not everybody, has aspirations to be a CEO. And I think, as youth workers,
thank God for that.
we've got to be really careful that we're not always trying to push people on like a promotion pathway as well, because that's not always what they want or need at that moment in their life. And I think it's easy to get lost in that.
I mean, not too much of a segue, because of course this could go on forever, but it's also helping the young people. They are innately adaptable because you're young, not old and inflexible like me. But the world of work is maybe not what you might either want or have conceived, or your limited experience. So that can be really good and it can be bad. And sometimes, when you sort of entering the workplace, it's like, there's a BBC story with a London apprentice program that they ran, where the BBC is highly divided in, I'm a producer, director, sound engineer, sound stroke this light and that. It's so specific. And a young person who's grown up with social media, it's like, I want to star in the film, I want to produce the film, I want to do the lighting, I want to everything. And it's so the BBC had to flex, but so did the young people. And the young people kind of had to understand that maybe another young leader interviewed, Jake, on this show, was saying that he was used to a world of instant stimulus response, bang, bang, but actually in organizations, in businesses, it seemed to move really slowly,
trickle.
Get used to the fact that it's not so quick in business. So day in the life of the staff of EY Foundation. Do you do all the work yourself? Do you help work with partners? I don't mean you.
Just you, Jodie.
It would seem like that when we joined. It's like, what? There's lots of people. What's a day in the life of being an employee or business partner of the EY Foundation?
I think, because like I said before, I've worked for charities big and small, and I think what is probably different about the foundation, which is not for everybody, being totally honest, is that probably because of the affiliation with obviously EY, we work more in a business fashion than like a traditional charity fashion. So things are very fast paced. Which I think can be a bit of a shock to the system sometimes. People that join from other charities, there's always a lot going on. I think the thing that people enjoy the most about working with us is the variety. So obviously a lot of the direct delivery team do work with young people day in and day out, which is the thing that obviously is the main reason why they get up and come to work every day. But outside of that, obviously we've got the relationship they need to develop with our corporate partners, obviously working closely with our volunteers, whether that be EY volunteers or volunteers from the local communities. There's obviously the school engagement side of things. No one person like within the programs team only runs one program, so we have obviously a range of different programs, some of them in the post-16 market, some of them obviously for secondary schools, and so peak times for most of our programs are school holidays, but then outside of that, it's all of the kind of prep to get to the point of that being delivered. And fortunately or unfortunately, our programs are quite heavy on process because we pay young people that come on them, and so contracting, onboarding, payroll, all of the boring stuff.
Okay, there's quite a lot of them. Yeah,
it takes a lot of
dull
time.
but worthy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the programs can't happen without it, but
No.
obviously it's not really the reason why people want to work for a charity. Do you know what I mean? It's to chase 50 young people for right to work information, which can sometimes happen. So there's always so much going on. Everything's quite complicated in terms of setting up and delivery of our programs because of the interface that we have with EY and some of the services provided by the firm. So there is certainly never a dull day, but I think there's a nice mix of things. And that's why, we've got a really low staff turnover rate, which is obviously great, much lower than the rest of the charity sector. So I think the variety, the environment, obviously the fact that we are ambitious and really driving towards that keeps people engaged in wanting to continue to work here.
And I think the young people work experience is just a tiny bit. You said they're paying people, because it's kind of like a holy grail, isn't it? Because you want to get people into work, and you want, and we've become massive advocates of basic income of any form, living wage, minimum wage, some form of basic income that will actually not look at just training people in skills or qualification or some particular so I think whatever the money flow, that's a great self-esteem, being paid to do. It doesn't matter what they're really engaged in, but that sort of exchange of money for time is what the labor market it eludes so many people is all about. And businesses, anybody who's listening, just creating jobs and paying people something legal is an enormous enabler. That just closes the gap instantly without any training or whatever. If you can make it sustainable, then do it.
Yeah, exactly. Value them for their contribution, is really important to us. And for me, it would be obtuse to bring in what essentially is a massive social mobility program. The young people we're working with are from low income backgrounds. We operate out of big cities, which are usually not the cheapest to travel in. So why would you not pay them? It doesn't make sense, really, for me not to do that. I think on the other side, one of the challenges is that obviously then it makes it quite difficult to scale massive, because the programs obviously then are quite expensive to run because of the young people payroll bill. But for us, it's a commitment that we've got, and one that we won't go away from. I don't think it's just really fundamental in terms of the programs that we offer and what we're trying to achieve.
So my last question, but Annabelle, then your question, because you've just led me into my last one, but it's unscripted, but it's about change in the world. So you've said to me before, if there was any frustration about the work, you love the youth work engagement directly, but the ambition, the frustration would be, I'd like to scale. I'd like to do a lot more, help a lot more people. What are your thoughts about that? So, I mean, you at EY Foundation, you got some really people. They put these ambitious numbers. How would you deliver the support for everybody who's on a and again age group? Then work is it may. So scaling. I mean, the question is scaling. How to scale?
Yeah, I mean, the key for that is obviously around collaboration, but it is the employers that hold the key, I think. So obviously, you know, diversity and social mobility is becoming more of a strategic imperative for employers now, which I think is helping to sort of turn the dial slightly. But I think the only way really that will make systemic change is if that every employer has some kind of commitment to social mobility in the same way that many of them do around other areas of diversity, because until, you know, unfortunately things are mandated a lot of the time, that is still the only way to make big change. And social mobility needs a higher profile than it's got at the moment. There are obviously lots of great organisations working on it, but I still think that there could be more. And everyone's stronger. You know, the collaboration point is really important to me because we're all stronger working together. I think in the charity sector, there's loads of people doing great work. It's still a competitive sector because of funding and everything else. But I think, you know, one day, if there's like the biggest charity sector collaboration of all time, where all of the youth charities are focused on really working in true collaboration, then that's the thing where you'll see, instead of incremental change, bigger change.
So it's quite, I mean, you know, not for today, but so if the change has got to come from employers, unpicking that has to be about not cookie cuttering the job roles in the way that employers have. And it may be that transitionally, in terms of inclusivity, it meets social mobility, that we've got to crack the business case for this. And it, you know, there's so many employers who, you know, they get the desire, they get the intrinsic motivation. Yes, I want to help. Oh, but ... You know, back to all those barriers of why they can't cookie cutter that role, because if you bring that but into that, you know, it doesn't work. And not everyone is a Timpsons, and Timpsons is quite famous for building something that will work for ex-offenders, and he's got an incredible business whose boxes actually are built for that. And there was another example at the Social Value Conference, a chap that I'm going to follow up with, who is a social entrepreneur, but he's a scrap metal, biggest scrap metal, you know, company in the UK, evidently, allegedly, you know, whatever. But he made the point that he's built his business on social mobility or social value. He's not trying to put social value in now. And it's, of course, you know, not easy, but because he's done that, he hasn't got the challenges that you would if you did it the other way round. And it's almost taking the learning from a business that, you know, the Timpsons are not doing it as an add-on, but actually working out how to redesign your business and say, well, okay, well, we've got different pathways, and actually recognizing that we might have to carve different pathways than our work design system at the moment. So you've triggered me, Jodie, on that. I'm quite passionate, you know, about this.
It's about starting small as well. Like with Timpsons, they didn't start like saying they were going to do this across their whole business. I think it was like Liverpool, if I remember rightly, where they started with just like one of their stores. Do you know what I mean? So I think everyone has the ability to start small. I think sometimes, exactly, rather than go in it and be like, we're going to do this for everywhere. Like, just do something and do it well on a small scale. Build the trust in your team and yourself that actually this is going to work. It's not going to destroy your business, and then go from there.
Such wise words. Brilliant. No, I'm on world domination. There's no intermediate step. Go on, Annabelle. I'm not.
No, I think more permission to. No, No, I think more permission to experiment. I felt that coming out. We've been to a couple of conferences recently, and I think people are so frustrated with things not working that they've eventually, you know, on this mission for 24 years, sort of coming to the realization that maybe we need to try something that's different, you know, just adjust ourselves. And actually, you can't do that holistically. You can't go, right, we're just going to change it. Just you'll never achieve that in that way. But by starting small, as you say, I feel that's it's definitely a way forward. Anyway, so I'm conscious of the time, but I wanted to ask, you know, call to action, Jodie. What anybody who's listening to this, what do you want them to do? Really? How can they help you?
Gosh. Yeah, well, there's many ways, like I said before. Some of it is just as little around giving your time. Do you know what I mean? And I think that can be really transformational.
Or your
to
money. I mean, or
a young
your
person.
money. We mustn't forget that.
Money was going to be my next point. Obviously, money is great. Helps us do a lot of great things with more young people. So, you know, there's always in a charity the need for more money. But also we can just work more closely with you to make sure, like I said, that your business is in a position to really then be open to working with young people. But
so what am I business? So I'm now a business. So God, this sounds one EY great, Jodie. You know, this sounds what do I do now as a chief exec or an employee? You know, what do you know? How do we get in touch? How do we take the first step? We haven't done this before.
You get in touch with me.
You can, on the website or, yeah.
I'm easy to find. You can find me on the website. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm quite easy to find. You drop me a line. The best first thing you can do is come down and actually see one of the programs in action and meet the young people face to face. That is like the very best thing that you can do, and that's easy to achieve. Obviously, we've got programs running all over the country, loads of opportunities for people to just pop down and see what's going on and meet the young people face to face. That's like the best first step that you can take. But yes, basically just hunt me down. I'm not hard to find, and drop me a line.
Excellent. Okay, I think we are good. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your thoughts, stories with us. So until next time, I'm going to say bye-bye to everyone. Bye-bye.
And also, thank you, Jodie. It was an incredible interview. Really brilliant. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for that.